welcome to the first round of today's National Television English Parliamentary Debate Competition. Ladies and gentlemen, the format of the Parliamentary Debate Competition differs from the traditional style. In this system, there is a government party and an opposition party. The motion is placed in the House by the Prime Minister, who is also the leader of the House. The role of the opposition is also to place constructive arguments against the bill. Today's motion before the House is, democracy is still a myth in the world. Comilla Cadet College Comilla is representing the government side and Aga Khan School Dhaka is representing the opposition bench. The government side is being represented by MD Bazid Islam of Comilla Cadet College Comilla, who is the Prime Minister and leader of the House. Ishtiaq Ahmed Tanfir is the member of the Cabinet and is in charge of Ministry of Law, Judiciary and Parliamentary Affairs. MD Mahin Islam is the member of the Treasury Bench. The opposition bench is being represented by Proma Aisha Kibria of Aga Khan School, Dhaka, who is the leader of the opposition. Samiha Hamid Chaudhary is the deputy leader of the opposition. Dhruvo Neil Ghosh is a member of the opposition bench. The honorable adjudicators of these sessions are Dr. Farah Diba, Associate Professor, Department of Clinical Psychology, University of Dhaka. Abdur Razak Mia, Associate Professor, Department of English and Training Specialist, National Academy for Educational and Management, Dhaka. Shakila Yasmin, Assistant Professor, Institute of Business Administration, IBA, University of Dhaka. Muhammad Abu Sufyan, Special Superintendent of Police, CID Dhaka. The Honorable Speaker of the House is Professor Harishito Bala, former Director, Directorate of Secondary and Higher Secondary Education, Ministry of Education. Before the House starts its proceeding, let me inform you about the order and time allocation of each debater. Prime Minister 4 minutes, Leader of the Opposition 5 minutes, Member of the Cabinet 5 minutes, Deputy Leader of the Opposition 5 minutes, Member of the Treasury Bench 5 minutes, Member of the Opposition Bench 5 minutes. The opposition leader will get another 3 minutes for rebuttal and the Prime Minister will get the last 4 minutes to wind up his party's stand. All the members of the competing teams, the adjudicators, the invited guests, and other members of the audience will comprise the members of the House. I now most humble request the Honorable Speaker to start today's proceedings. Honorable Speaker, please.
Thank you, dear viewers. Welcome to today's debate. Before the debate, I'd like to inform the participants of this competition. If any one of you wants to put forward any point of information for or against the argument, he or she can do that with the permission of the speaker. And by no means he or she can do it more than once. I would like to begin the competition with my request to the Honorable Prime Minister and the leader of this House for taking the floor.
The Prime Minister would like to propose a motion, democracy is still a myth in the world, in today's session. The motion has two keywords, democracy and myth, and let me define these two words. Democracy is a form of government in which all eligible citizens participate equally through elected representatives in the proposal, amendment and creation of laws. Again, Abraham Lincoln said, democracy is a form of government of the people, for the people and by the people. On the other hand, myth, as per Oxford Dictionary, is something that many people believe, but that doesn't exist or is a false story. Honorable Speaker, though the idea is totally clear that democracy is absolutely a myth, but still, in the next few minutes, I'm going to show why and how democracy is termed as myth. Starting with the definition of Abraham Lincoln, where it is said that government has to work for the people, they will have to be elected by the people, and they will only exercise the laws being the representative of the people. But in the world, things are totally different because there are many countries like US and India where 52 and 34% of the total eligible voters are not actually voting. Then how honorable members of the opposition can still claim that the government actually is elected by the people? And again, there are some countries like who are actually not the government, actually not working for the people, are they? And is there any country where the actually government is only exercising the laws but not changing the laws according to the government's own need and own favor? I hope that my opposition bench will answer these three questions. Actually, Honorable Speaker, by democracy, I am meaning the absolute and complete democracy where all the democratic norms will be fulfilled. And as we all know, there are many democratic norms. For example, regular election, different political party system, freedom of press, guarantee of fundamental human rights, and many more. But in the world, most of the democratic countries are more or less violating those democratic norms. For example, in Egypt, they have banned the freedom of press. And again, in Malaysia, the government has illegally oppressed and wiped out all the opposition parties. And just like this, every single country are violating the democratic norms, and that is why democracy is termed as myth. Actually, Honorable Speaker, what is the outcome of democracy? The idea was established in such a way that if a country implements all the ideas of democracy perfectly, they will face not a single problem. I'm repeating, not a single problem. But what is happening in the world is every so-called democratic country are facing a lots of problems. For example, corruption. Transparency International's report says among the top 100 corrupted countries, 89 are so-called democratic countries. And again, there is one problem in common in every so-called democratic country, and that is political unrest. And that is why Plato said, democracy is a charming form of government full of variety and disorder. So, Honorable Speaker, as a so-called democratic country is affected by so many problems at a time, so it just indicates there is always some loopholes and the implementation is never ever perfect with the democracy, and that is why democracy is termed as myth. Honorable Speaker, actually, after me, if still anyone is not clear about today's motion, after me, the Honorable Consent Minister and the member of the Treasury bench will come up and show their arguments and logics within some examples to show why democracy is termed as myth. But still at the end, I'd like to ask one more question to my opposition bench members. If you still claim that democracy is not a myth, please show us at least 3 or 4 countries where all the democratic norms are perfectly maintained and they are practicing proper democracy so that you can prove democracy is not a myth.
Now, we would like to hear from the Honorable Leader of the Opposition bench. She will place her arguments against the motion. Honorable Leader of the Opposition bench.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me the floor. So today, side government comes up and gives us a couple of questions to answer, and they finish with this most important question, that can you give us any examples of any countries that do in fact follow the democratic norms to the letter? And we tell you that we can give you examples of such countries. In fact, we can give you 3 such examples of countries. For example, starting with, we give you Finland, Belgium, as well as most importantly Switzerland, who do in fact follow the democratic countries' norms to the letter. And in Switzerland, majority of all decisions are made not only through the representative democracy, but many voters are so actively interested in the democracy itself that they also take part in a form of direct democracy, where the voters themselves vote for the issue at hand, foregoing the need for a representative in the first place. Tell us, is this not the highest form?
51% in Pakistan, 66% in India of Asia, 48% in the USA, 74% in the Canada of North America, 52% in Switzerland, and 66% in Hungary of Europe cast their votes in the election. Source Wikipedia. Under these circumstances, how can we expect democracy to be more than a myth? Question remains. Honorable Speaker, let's focus on the flag bearer of democracy, the United States of America. The highly flawed nature of American democracy is the absence of political values, massive economic inequality, job insecurity, corruption, declining the standard of living, manipulation of public opinion, and authoritarianism. Indeed, the presidential election of 2016 makes America a banana republic. I repeat, banana republic, just like Ghana, Nigeria, and Maldives.
Sir.
Yes.
Is the proposition speaker aware that Hillary Clinton actively won the popular vote, but rather lost to the electoral college system specific to the United States?
Asking about the presidential election of USA, which happened in 2016. So, honorable member of the opposition, we can say that democracy is not practiced properly in the USA. Well, racism is still prevalent in the USA, and the equality of justice, one of the main tenets of democracy, is denied to the black people who were unfortunately given the right to vote only some 80 years back. The unusual behavior of USA obviously projects the anti-democratic spirit, but how? The USA is very much fond of supporting and patronizing the anti-democratic or the monarchy government like Saudi Arabia and the countries of United Arab Emirates. So don't all this prove that democracy is still a myth in the world? Honorable Speaker, in a democratic country, the coordination of three organs of government, executive, judiciary, and legislature is a must. In the executive, the rule of law must be ensured. Whereas in the so-called democratic country USA, 11,737 Americans are shot every year by another American, according to the statistics of gun violence. Being the champion of democracy, the core principles of democracy, the rule of law is absolutely missing there, and unfortunately it cannot be done more than as a... Honorable Speaker, it requires two different steps to establish democracy in a country. Number one is the contents of democracy, and number two is the executing the contents of it. So in the contents of democracy, the values and the norms are prevailing. But in the present world, most of the countries have the contents of democracy, which are the self-creation by the wishes of the rulers, as for example Portugal and Venezuela. Again, some other countries do keep all the contents of democracy as per the pure democracy, but even don't execute half of them. So unfortunately and ultimately what we find is an impure democracy or a mirage of democracy, and that's what proves that democracy is still a myth in the world. Honorable Speaker, now let me discuss more loopholes of democracy. Democracy is the other name of a tool of oppressing the minority by the majority. Sweden government, for example, forcibly sterilized thousands of innocent women due to mental defects or simply because of mixed race. Honorable Speaker, now let me show another example of a so-called democratic countries. Even after almost 100 years of practicing democracy, 23% people of Congo live under extreme poverty line, 31% with no medical support. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister and the President of those countries are the two richest persons who never even think about the welfare of the people. And this is the present situation of democracy over the world, Honorable Member of the Opposition Bench. Honorable Speaker, democracy is yet to be institutionalized in any country, whereas it took as many as 300 years, I repeat, 300 years to institutionalize democracy in England, which is the most civilized nation of the whole world. So it's not a plaything of children to institutionalize democracy unless the democratic values and norms are practiced properly. Unfortunately, there is no such a single country where these democratic values are practiced properly. Lastly, as the Honorable Prime Minister has asked the Honorable Member of the Opposition Bench to state 3 or 4 democratic countries which are practicing democracy in true sense of the term, still our Honorable Member of the Opposition Bench stated some countries which are practicing democracy, but I said, and our Honorable Member of the Opposition Bench still said that they are not the pure democratic countries. Please show us a pure democratic countries which is practicing the true sense of pure democracy. With this, I would like to conclude my speech here. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Thanks to all.
Now, I would like to invite Honorable Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's side government comes up and tells you, and we find this very interesting, almost focuses the entire speech on the United States, which focuses on a form of elective government which is not universal, which is only specific. The Electoral College is only US specific. Ladies and gentlemen, to start off with, that is not a true representation of why democracy is a myth, and thus fails to prove their case in that line. Now, ladies and gentlemen, about highly flawed economic problems, about racism. Now, that has continued, but was far worse in systems that were not democratic. Ladies and gentlemen, we tell you, democracy, when it emerged in its true form, that is exactly when these problems eventually started to be mitigated. They are by no means solved, but we are by means getting there. Now, ladies and gentlemen, about their examples, about how the United Kingdom, about how Belgium still has monarchies side by side, you realize that the government and political decisions are all made by the Prime Minister. They are all made by the elected government. The monarchy in the United Kingdom and other European nations still have little to no say about what goes on in the particular government in and of itself, ladies and gentlemen. About how democracy is a tool of oppression. Now, ladies and gentlemen, democracy is rather the salvation from oppression. Today, my argument will mostly refer to about how the tangible benefits of a democratic system only came about because of the emergence of a democracy. And thus, exactly how can any system have benefits? Exactly how can any system have any sort of benefit or good or effect, rather, if it was not true and if it was not specific to democracy? Now, ladies and gentlemen, moving on to my construct about how political freedom. Exactly what is political freedom? Where people have autonomy, the ability to make their own choices, and the knowledge that these choices have impact. Recalling my first speaker about how democracy, as we have said, is practiced by those who choose to vote. We are protecting, democracy is protecting the right of everyone to go out and vote. However, it is not legally enforced in most countries that it is made mandatory. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in systems that could not have possibly given the tangible benefits that democracy specifically has provided. Socialism, communism, monarchies. We tell you, these nations had no freedom of speech, had no freedom of press. But however, in response to side government's specific accusation, we tell you this situation was far worse before democracies were globally implemented. The French people in the French Revolution of the 17th century
Honorable Speaker, our Honorable Deputy Leader of the Opposition has asked for the monarchy system in the UK, and she wanna term it as a democracy. But I would like to inform you that monarchy cannot run in the same band with the democracy of the monarch, because as the monarch is not elected, so it cannot be termed as a democratic system. So how can we term this type of government as a democratic government? Question for them. Thank you.
Sir, the response to that debate is that this is not a debate about what the definition of democracy is and of itself. It's a debate based on whether democracy is truth in life or not. Now, sir, moving on to the benefits that I've been discussing about the racial bias, about the particular examples of blacks in America. Once Barack Obama, who actively went out and started campaigning in 2008, millions of black people who did not care, people who were apathetic about the voters, that's side government like to suggest, people who did not care actively went out in the streets, they started campaigning, they started becoming more politically informed. We tell you, and we tell you, because they found a representative. They found a representative in a government, and this brought power to the blacks of America. Democracy brings you power. Democracy brings people the power, and it defends your right to the death of keeping that power. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if even with what you're suggesting, even if all the flaws of current global nations, inequality, media bias, and so on and so forth, then you're suggesting that all democracies eventually devolve into systems like monarchy or autocracy. But they do not. Switzerland granted democracy ever since its very conception to other nations who have been granted democracy much more recently. They have still yet to devolve into a system that is similar to autocracy. For example, the IBSATI nations. The IBSATI, which includes India, Brazil, South Africa, Turkey, and Indonesia. These nations reached democracy in different levels of time. One in 1985, the other in 1966. Their GDPs has increased tenfold, not because of any other economics, but because of democracy, but because the people had their information.
Now, I would request the Honorable Member of the Treasury Bench to present his arguments.
So far, hearing the long speeches of my honorable opposition's first two speakers, it is clear to me that they are still not concerned about the motion of today's session. So let me clarify it again. Our Honorable Prime Minister and Council Minister have already made it clear that there is no debate on whether democracy is the best form of government or not. Rather, our today's debate is on whether the so-called democratic countries are being able to exercise all the pure democratic principles or not. I want to ask a question to the members of the Honorable Opposition Bench. Where is the end of farce going on in Jordan in the name of democracy? Jordan started the practice of so-called democracy from 1989 through political reformation. But still, the outdated constitution of 1952 enables the King of Jordan to dissolve and reconvene the so-called democratic parliament, to select and dismiss the members of the Senate, and to directly control the other branches of the government. Thus, elections are just a mask or facade of civic participation behind the tools of the King's Palace to employ various methods to control its timid representatives. So, isn't the democracy in Jordan prevailing only in the name and thereby making it a complete myth? Honorable Speaker.
Yes.
Understand that not everywhere in the world is democracy as a myth. We already gave you the example of how direct democracy is being practiced in Switzerland, and we'd also like to give you the example of Botswana, where ever since 1966, despite being a least developed country, they are still having unfettered, uncorrupted elections to this day. What do you say to that?
Okay, thank you, Honorable Opposition Bench, for your question. So, the thing is that not every country in the world is practicing all the pure democratic principles according to the true sense, which is making democracy still a myth. I think you have got your answer. So moving on, Honorable Speaker. Now let us focus on South Africa, the prototype of democracy practicing countries in the African continent. The idea of democracy is very much popular in South Africa, and they are often deemed as one of the most modern democracy practicing countries in the world. But the question is, how far are the democratic values being practiced there? Because values of democracy includes ensuring a politically tolerant government and also ensuring equality and liberty of the people. Special emphasis is laid on equality in democracy, and there is no disparity among the citizens irrespective of caste, color, creed, religion, status, or so on. But what do we get in the speech of Jacob Zuma, the president of South Africa, who says, "We have more rights here because we are a majority, you have fewer rights here because you are a minority." Absolutely, that's how democracy works. This statement is a clear indication of a politically intolerant government and also a direct and naked violation of equality, which is one of the major norms of democracy. Thus, democracy is prevailing in South Africa only in the name, but in real sense, the democracy is not being practiced there. Again, values of democracy support full accountability and transparency of the government to the people. But these values are also absent from South African democracy, as they have clouds of controversies surrounding their senior political appointments, such as the Chief Justice and also the National Police Commissioners, which has made the parliament less acceptable to its citizens. So did the implementation of all the values become possible in South Africa, Honorable Opposition Bench? No, and so is the democracy. Honorable Speaker, another burning global issue is the recent referendum of Catalonia of Spain. The referendum was held for the independence of Catalonia by the regional government. Clashes occurred among the voters and the police when the Spanish National Police tried to prevent people from attending the polling station. Despite these anarchies, 22,86,217 people voted for the referendum. Out of them, 20,55,038 people voted yes for the independence. Source www.statisticsbureau.com. But immediately after the referendum, the Parliament of Catalan was suspended, making the referendum null and void. The opinion of the Catalan citizens was completely ignored in this case. Now my question is, which definition of democracy completely denies people opinion and their rights? Honorable Speaker, under the safe banner of democracy, all the hypocrite politicians are depriving common people of their rights that they are legally entitled to. In the name of democracy, what they are doing are nothing but deception in disguise. The fraudulence is obvious in the USA, which is practicing so-called democracy, but it is not free from racism. Again, the United Kingdom, which is a pioneer of democracy, but has monarchism. This scenario of violating democratic norms and values are persisting all around the world, including the countries like Greece, Syria, Egypt, Malaysia, Canada, South Africa, and so on. So, honorable members of the opposition bench, you can easily understand what these countries are practicing in the name of democracy, are branding democracy nothing but as a myth in the world. Honorable Speaker, the idea of democracy first originated in Athens of Greece in 450 BC. But more than 2,450 years have passed after the promulgation of democracy, yet not even a single country in the world has been able to practice all the pure democratic values. And for this reason, famous political scientist S.E. Feiner on his book, The Man on the Horseback, has quoted, "Democracy is a form of government which cannot be totally exist." And that is why, as for 2,450 years, no country has been able to implement all the pure democratic values. For this reason, it ultimately proves democracy is still a myth. And for this reason, it is clear that democracy cannot exist and will not exist as it is a myth.
Now, honorable member of the opposition, it's your turn. I'd like to invite you to speak against the motion.
When the proposition comes up and tells us that democracy involves the votes of the eligible citizens, they must realize that all the quotes they were making was of the entire populace of that country. You must realize that when you say eligible, that person who is casting a vote on a specific decision has to be sound of the entire political ongoings of the country and the entire political policies that are brought up during the election. So do you think that the entire nation or the entire populace of the country is eligible to vote, as you have already stated? Since the entire populace is not eligible as a whole, shouldn't the democracy be limited to those who are only eligible? If you bring in the entire populace of the country, you do realize that there will be people giving the votes based on completely irrational decisions because they're not sound of the entire thing that is going on at the end of the day. So the voting, since the percentage of voting might not be of the entire populace, but it consists of those very people who are eligible, who think that they know what is going on. That is why they go to cast the vote. If people can make that very effort to go to the poll and cast the vote, they will make the effort to know what is going on. If the people don't go to the polls at all, they won't make the effort to know what is going on at the end of the day. So are those people eligible to vote under the democracy that we're talking about? Secondly, they have constantly been coming up and telling us that democracy has devolved in various countries, citing numerous examples. But we tell you that if democracy did devolve, why are there increased literacy rates in countries? Why are there decreased child mortality rates in such countries if democracy did devolve at the end of the day? Furthermore, they've constantly come up and talked about racism in USA, which by ideal is not exactly an entire democracy at the end of the day. But even though racism did exist, we would not have a black president of the United States who was the ex-president Barack Obama. And under Barack Obama, there were numerous people who came up, black people who didn't know what was going on before. But under Barack Obama, they did come up and speak for their rights. Furthermore, they've already stated that the monarchy exists beside the democratic government. No, the monarchy does not have that much of a say as to what the people have a say in the UK Parliament. If the Parliament wants, they can even omit the monarchy from the Parliament itself, and so the people have the power at that very position. Furthermore, they state that this debate isn't about whether democracy is the best form of government. My question to the government side, if democracy isn't the best form of government, if democracy is the best form of government, why is it a myth? If it is the best form of government at the end of the day, why would it be a myth? Why would it still be carried on today if it was a myth at the end of the day? Please answer that question. Furthermore, now moving on to the constructives which I have. First and foremost, the government side has constantly come up and tell us that democracy in most countries, the all explicit values of democracy have not been completely implemented in most countries. But what we see is that when democracy itself was founded, it was founded a long time ago. It was founded in some 300 BC or so. So when the basic ideals of democracy were founded, I bet that the people who thought about democracy at that time wasn't aware of political pressure, wasn't aware of geopolitical pressure, wasn't aware of climate change. They weren't aware of natural resource hazard, which is present today. So, is a person who is forming the entire basis of democracy, does he have the right to predict what democracy will be today, which is a completely different age from what was before? So the statement which I'd like to make here is that democracy in itself is a very evolving factor. The way democracy is represented in countries is completely territorial based and dependent on the stability of the government, on the resources of the government, and how liberal the mentality of the people overall are in that country. So if democracy is such an evolving concept, how isn't it absurd to keep on asking why aren't the entire basis of values formed in countries, and so on and so forth? Furthermore, as they already come up and tell us that in most countries there is not entire voter participation, what we would like to tell you is that when people are given the chance to decide who they're voting, who their party will be, who will lead the country at the end of the day, what you must realize is that that person will at least have to make some sort of an effort to know who they're voting for before they will make the vote at the end of the day, right? So, isn't this entire system a more involving system compared to others? As people who are making the vote will have to make that effort before they vote, right? Or else it will be completely irrational to place a vote. Furthermore, they have said that in developing countries, most of the top 89 or so corrupt countries are democracies at the end of the day. That also goes on to prove another point, that the majority of countries present in this world are democracies, despite the fact that most of them are corrupt, because they're LEDCs where corruption is most viable in LEDCs. I'd like the government side to come up and provide us a separate system where the country is developing yet has better facilities than the democratic countries. We'd like to bring up an example such as that.
Now the rebuttal round, and this time let me begin with my request to the Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
We'll start by saying that we have successfully managed to answer all the questions that side government has posed us, right? They begin with telling us about how democracy, what the definition of democracy and how it's a myth, and how they've asked us to give us 3 different examples of a democracy that actually works, right? We've already answered that. We've given you 3 examples. We've told you about Finland, Belgium and Switzerland. To that they just answer, well, that's not a pure democracy. We tell you that that's not enough of a rebuttal. You have to tell us why Switzerland's direct democracy doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? We're saying that it's working fine. They come up and talk to us about constitutional monarchies and so on and so forth, right? Understand that if for a constitutional monarchy to have any weight in this debate, they have to have any power. They don't. The constitutional monarchy can be removed by a popular vote. Right, the parliament reserves the right to remove them from power. They're nothing but a figurehead. They're a tourism gang. They're so that people come to UK to see the Buckingham Palace and shell out pounds for the Big Ben models, right? That's what it's for. So we tell you that at the end of the day, true monarchies do exist. They come up and talk to us about how referendums and such don't work, right? We tell you that we have history of successful referendums occurring in the world. We tell you about the Brexit referendum, which went off successfully without hitch, without any bloodshed. We tell you about the Scottish referendum, where the Scottish people chose to remain part of the United Kingdom, which went off successfully without a hitch, right? There are examples of pure democracy working in today's world. Moreover, they've come up to us and told us about corruption and so on and so forth, and how these governments are corrupt and oppressed. To that, we've already told you how democracy is the only one which hands a platform to the minorities by giving them political freedom and freedom of speech, right? They've talked about Barack Obama and the racial bias in US, which, by the way, is not the elite example that they've tried to paint it as, because electoral college system does not exist anywhere else. But we tell you that even so, racial bias and such holds less water in democracies than anywhere else in the world, because in democracies, the minorities have a right to elect a representative for themselves. Minorities can stand up, which in theocracies, aristocracies, so on and so forth, would never happen, right? And we've told you that even in these corrupt areas, people are still striving towards the democracy, because, and we've given you the example of the Ipsati nations, like India, Brazil, South Africa, so on and so forth, who keep on cycling towards democracy. When corrupt people come in power, they protest and they bring them back in power, remove them from power, and at the end of the day, Ipsati nations have seen a marked increase in their economic growth, GDPs, and decrease in their mortality rates, death rates, sicknesses, so on and so forth, once they have become democracies, right? So because we've proven to you why once they have become democracies, these market improvements have happened, these benefits could not have happened if democracy was a myth. We've given you an example of true democracies existing in this world, and we've shown you why all of the rebuttals don't hold water in our world with rebuttals of our own of the referendums. We believe we do take this debate home. Very proud to oppose.
Now, Honorable Prime Minister and the Leader of the House.
As we're talking about the most important issue of Switzerland, you say that the eligible voters are those who actually knows everything about there and so on. But the statistics says that 99% of the total population is always educated in Switzerland. So actually we can think from this that yes, maximum of the population is eligible for voting, but still they are not voting. You say that they actually don't know about the political parties and so on, but there is a right of information, and that is what they are just aware from, not getting that right, and that is why they are not voting the votes perfectly. And this is the reason why 52% of the voters of Switzerland is only casting votes, and this is the mythical condition of democracy. Actually, no one is perfectly aware of the democratic countries, and this is why the examples you gave are not valid, because all of those countries are falling back because the 100%, not actually 100%, maximum 80% or 85% are voting, and that is why we are indicating that democracy is not valid there. And you said about USA, Barack Obama, where he was the president being a black people, but actually in USA the racism is not prevailing in the higher profiles, it is in the lower profiles. The equality should be established all over the country, not only in the president's election or the member of the parliament election. It should be like the root level. And again, you again and again talking about the government-based political system, as the third speaker also told us to give another example or another replacement for government system of democracy. We are actually not trying to say that we don't want democracy. We want democracy, but without any loopholes, without any implementation. We want that democracy. But what we are talking about, yes, the absolute democracy may be established in future, but our topic is still a myth in the world. At present, there is not a single country who can say that yes, they are practicing all the democratic norms. Actually, the democratic index of Wikipedia says that the highest has the Norway, with 90% of the democratic norms are maintained there. Not a single country with 100%. Norway, the highest one with 90%. So, democratic index is clearly indicating that there is no perfect country. And actually, the monarchy system. You told us that the constitutional monarchy, actually the queen or king are not actually having the full power or something else. But what is the actual practice of democracy? The elected person has to be on the top of the list of everything. But in monarchy system, at last, whatever the bill passes for the government, the monarchy king or queen has to sign that very bill to pass it on and establish on the country. And this is directly against the democratic norms, and that is why democracy is myth. Actually, you told us that people are actually having lots of powers, and the leaders are always, if they did anything wrong, they are but just snatched away from the leading position. But if we consider the present world, we will see Donald Trump and Bashar al-Assad even being just a nightmare for the total mass people, they're still on the power because the democracy is not perfectly implemented in those countries like the other countries do. And you also said that the Bostonia, that they are having the perfect democracy like Switzerland, Finland, though I have discussed why Switzerland and Finland don't have. But in Bostonia, the women are still not getting the perfect right of everything, just like many LADCs are having. And you also said in LADCs that in the LADCs the corruption rate is very high because in a developing country there will be always corruption at a higher stage. But the idea of democracy said whenever a country is implementing all the democratic norms perfectly, as there will be transparent democracy and there will be no corruption for sure, no matter it is developing or a developed or underdeveloped country. As there is corruption, it is not meeting all the democratic norms. We are again and again saying that there are lots of democratic norms. Your country might get the... Can I get 50 seconds?
No, please. They have given their arguments reasonable. And we, as the viewers here, we have come across the fact that both of them were very much successful in doing their job. I am also confused. Before passing any comment, let me quote some of the beautiful sayings of some great men. Winston S. Churchill said in 1947, "Many forms of the government have been tried and will be tried in this world of sin and woe. No one pretends that democracy is perfect and all-wise. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others." What about Jesus? Religious interpretation. Jesus Christ. Give back to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Well, this is all about them. But before coming to a conclusion, let us see what actually democracy is, that we have already come across, we have already learned from their arguments. Someone spoke for it, someone spoke against it. But the real picture is somewhere else. The two words here, democracy and myth, as the leader of the house has already told that myth, something false. People believe, but it doesn't exist. And someone from the government side referred to the Athenian. But do you think that in our country, where poverty and illiteracy are big problems, only that classical democracy is a must for us? But we don't find its practice anywhere. They refer to USA, electoral and something else, which is very much ambiguous to us. Here and there, everywhere. For all these things, do you think democracy, the problem lies with democracy? Or the people who practice it, who practice the principles of democracy? Well, real democracy, defined in the textbook, is a myth. I'll say for it now. Because what we see being practiced globally in the name of majority people's rule is not democracy in the real sense of the term. You will have to accept it. The winner of today's debate, those who spoke for the motion, the government side, Comilla Cadet College, Comilla. Best of everything for all. Respected viewers, learned adjudicators, and those who participated in this competition. Thank you all.